Welcome to this explainer on the life and legacy of Aisha bint Abi Bakr. We're going to dive right into the incredible, completely multifaceted life of one of the absolute most prominent figures in early Islamic history. When we look back at the foundational years of Islam, there are very few individuals whose impact is as deep, as broad, or honestly, as passionately discussed as Aisha.
Now, while a lot of people know her primarily as Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him's, closest wife, we really have to ask a much bigger question here. Wife, scholar, or military commander? Was she merely a wife, or was she a foundational scholar, a total legal pioneer, and get this, a pivotal military commander? Today, we're going to explore how one incredible woman encapsulated all of these roles, effectively shaping the Islamic faith as we know it today.
Let's start with Section 1, the foundation, early life and upbringing.
Born right into the inner circle of this emerging faith in Mecca, somewhere around 607 to 614 CE, Aisha grew up in a purely Islamic environment. Her dad was Abu Bakr, the Prophet's closest friend, and the man who'd eventually become the very first caliph. Now, when it comes to her marriage to the Prophet, we run into a really highly debated historical discussion regarding her age. If we look at traditional reports, they often state she was engaged at 6 or 7 and married at 9 or 10. But there's actually a really strong body of contextual factors and evidence to consider alongside that. For instance, her confirmed presence at the battlefront of Uhud, a place where young children were strictly turned away. Add to that her profound scholarly maturity during these early events and the age difference with the Prophet's daughter Fatima, all of which strongly suggest she might have actually been 17 or 18. But look, regardless of where scholars land on this timeline, the sources emphasize that in that specific historical context, early marriages were just the norm. In fact, even the Prophet's harshest contemporary critics literally never raised their age difference as an issue.
Moving on to Section 2, the trial, the slander incident.
This brings us to a massive narrative climax in her early life. It's this gripping, honestly terrifying story from the desert that would forever shape Islamic law. It all happened in the 7th year after the Hijrah. Day 1, she accidentally gets separated from her caravan in the desert. Imagine the panic, right? Well, day 2, she is rescued by a Muslim soldier named Safwan, who very respectfully leads her camels safely back to Medina. Safe and sound. But then, during weeks 1 through 4, a man named Abdullah bin Ubay decides to seize on this completely innocent event, and he fabricates and spreads these totally vicious rumors of infidelity. So for an entire month, Aisha, who was severely ill at the time and actually initially unaware of the rumors, was subjected to a horrific whisper campaign. The community was completely fractured, and even the Prophet was gripped with anxiety, just unsure of what to believe. Ultimately, that agonizing month-long wait ended when a divine revelation, specifically verses in Surah An-Nur, descended directly to the Prophet, proclaiming her absolute innocence. But here is why this matters so much. The resulting revelation did way more than just clear her name. It permanently established a super strict Islamic legal requirement. Basically, to legally prove an accusation of adultery, you now had to produce 4 eyewitnesses to the actual act. This profoundly shifted the legal protection of women, essentially taking her personal suffering and turning it into a lasting, fiercely protective legal precedent.
Okay, let's head into Section 3, the intellectual, the scholar of scholars.
After the Prophet passed away, and he actually famously chose to take his last breath resting quietly right in her arms, Aisha stepped into a completely new era of her life. She transformed into this towering intellectual force, becoming known far and wide as the scholar of scholars or the teacher of teachers. And I really want you to focus on this staggering number, 2,210. That is the number of hadiths, the documented sayings and actions of the Prophet that she personally narrated. Because of her incredibly sharp memory and her unique, intimate access to his private life, she fundamentally shaped our modern understanding of Islamic practices. We're talking everything from daily rituals like fasting and prayer, all the way to incredibly complex inheritance laws. And her expertise absolutely wasn't just limited to religious texts. One of her top male students, Urwa ibn al-Zubair, really captured the vast breadth of her encyclopedic knowledge. He basically said, "I did not see a greater scholar than Aisha in the learning of Quran, obligatory duties, lawful and unlawful manners, poetry, literature, Arab history, and genealogy." I mean, wow. She wasn't just a theologian. Remarkably, her expertise even spanned medicine and mathematics. When foreign delegations would visit the Prophet to discuss medical remedies, she'd sit there, memorize them, and was later able to recommend those very same treatments for her own community. Talk about a polymath. Because of this absolutely brilliant mind of hers, she didn't just passively memorize texts. She actively pioneered fiqh, or Islamic jurisprudence. If you're not familiar, fiqh is basically comprehending the deep reasoning and justification for judgments, and then deriving novel rulings based on knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. Aisha was uniquely positioned to do this. Think about it. During the Prophet's life, if she didn't comprehend the cause behind a ruling, she simply asked him, why? She wouldn't just accept it. She wanted the reasoning. And that insistence on understanding the why allowed her to derive entirely novel, completely new legal rulings long after he was gone.
So naturally, she quickly became the ultimate authority for this rapidly expanding empire. Her small room in Medina basically turned into a bustling classroom. And she didn't hold back. She would actively correct senior male companions when they misunderstood religious texts or the Prophet's true intent. In fact, the most famous jurists of the time openly admitted that whenever they encountered a really complex difficulty, they'd just refer it straight to Aisha. Why? Because she always had the definitive answer.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Commander, the Battle of the Camel.
Her powerful influence and strong voice eventually pulled her out of the classroom and into the complex and honestly tragic political arena. This all builds up to the first major civil war among Muslims, known as the First Fitna. Here is the road to how it happened. Step 1, the third caliph, Uthman, is tragically assassinated by insurgents. Step 2, Aisha, who feels incredibly strongly about justice, leads a contingent with companions Talha and Zubair to find the murderers. Step 3, the new caliph, Ali, wants to establish stability first before punishing anyone. And then, Step 4, a secretive group of insurgents called the Sabiya, who feared a peaceful reconciliation between these two sides, secretly instigate fighting between the two camps in the dead of night. Suddenly, Aisha found herself literally commanding an army of 13,000 troops from an armored palanquin atop her camel, right in the absolute thick of the fiercest fighting.
To truly grasp the historical weight of this conflict, we really have to look at it impartially through both major Islamic lenses, because they interpret her political involvement quite differently. If we look at the Sunni perspective, it emphasizes that Aisha intended reconciliation and justice for Uthman. It notes that Ali graciously pardoned her after the battle, and she respectfully retired from politics. On the flip side, the Shia perspective holds that Aisha acted wrongly by challenging Ali's legitimate leadership. But, and this is a really important caveat, while she is highly criticized for this within the Shia view, she remains respected as the Prophet's wife, and insulting her is actually widely forbidden by mainstream scholars.
Ultimately, her side was defeated, and the camel she commanded from was struck down. The sources tell us she deeply regretted her role in the bloodshed, and this entire event became a massive, ongoing focal point in historical debates regarding women taking on political and military roles. But her survival and escorted return back to Medina allowed her to step away from politics completely. She took that opportunity to refocus the final decades of her life on her true calling, education and ethics.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, the Legacy, a lasting global impact.
In her later years, she really modeled absolute piety and humility. Despite the immense wealth pouring into the rapidly expanding Islamic empire, she lived in utter simplicity. She fasted almost constantly. And it's reported that if she received a government stipend, she'd distribute literally all of it to the poor on the exact same day, keeping absolutely nothing for herself, not even enough to buy food to break her own fast. Ultimately, her life profoundly transformed the status of women in the Islamic world. She acted as a vital confidant and intermediary for female companions who might have been too shy to ask the Prophet certain intimate questions. She absolutely insisted on sharing her knowledge widely, strictly preventing its restriction. She practically established the foundational rules of Arab Islamic ethics and charity. And above all else, she provided this powerful, undeniable historical model of female leadership, intellect, and independence.
So we want to leave you with this final thought. What would Islamic jurisprudence, ethics, and history even look like today without the 2,210 narrations of Aisha bint Abi Bakr? Seriously, consider how vastly different the landscape of Islamic history, law, and daily practice would be without her towering intellect, her inquisitive nature, and her fierce dedication to the truth. Her legacy goes so far beyond just being a wife. She was a foundational architect of a global faith. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.